Hi, I'm Katy Wallace, and this is the Tips for Gut Diversity program. Today, I'm going to talk about tips number 1 through 4. This information is for health education reasons only and should not be taken as medical advice. All right, so before we start talking about things to do to improve gut diversity, I wanted to briefly talk about why gut diversity is important. So all of us have a unique microbiome. That microbiome is a community of different organisms like bacteria, fungus, different microbial organisms that do a number of jobs for us. And it can be a very simple community or a very complex community, and it can be made up of healthy individuals or harmful individuals. So when we're talking about maximizing gut diversity, what I mean is we're trying to maximize the number of different beneficial strains in order to get the maximum health benefit. So we know from scientific studies that decreased gut diversity or a less diverse microbiome is linked to a number of chronic conditions, including obesity, type 2 diabetes, chronic fatigue, and cancer. We also know that decreased diversity is correlated with chronic digestive problems. So whether it's IBS or another chronic digestive ailment, it has been identified by researchers that that's related to not having enough beneficial bacteria, both in terms of numbers and in terms of different types of species. So both things are important. You have to have the right number, right volume, and you have to have a number of different strains that do different things of bacteria in the gut. So these bacteria do a lot of different things. They help digest our food. They help play an important role in our immune system. They can help fight off infections. They can help keep inflammation in check. And they can affect the level of serotonin and different neurotransmitters and hormones that we make. And so they affect our mental health also. All right, so here's tip number 1 for ways to increase gut diversity. Get more sunlight. We know from different scientific studies that there's a very strong connection between the number of beneficial gut bacteria and our vitamin D level. Vitamin D is just one indication of how much sun we get, because when we go out in the sun and there's enough UV available at that time of year, we will make vitamin D in our body. And the vitamin D carries out a number of beneficial functions, including functions in the gut that help make it a more habitable environment for good bacteria. So this is just a clip from a study that was done with men, revealing that men with higher vitamin D levels had healthier gut bacteria. This next study was actually done with women. It's kind of an interesting study because they had women who didn't have any kind of intervention. So overall, their vitamin D levels were low, and they did not have as good of gut bacteria. And then they compared them to women who took vitamin D supplements and women who made vitamin D using UV therapy. And what they actually found was that both the groups with the vitamin D support, either by supplementation or by light therapy, had more gut bacteria than the control group that had no support. However, those women who actually made the vitamin D on their own versus a supplement had even healthier gut lining, healthier gut bacteria. So there is a difference between making adequate vitamin D, and most of us have to work pretty hard at that. I'll be honest, if you live in a place like Wisconsin, it's not like you just go out when you feel like it and you're going to make vitamin D. But it does matter whether or not you make it yourself versus supplement, and there can be some drawbacks to taking vitamin D supplements long term. I cover a lot about vitamin D in my vitamin D webinar. So if you're curious about this subject where I talk for a very long time about vitamin D, go check it out. One of my tips would be to get this application for your phone. It's a free app and it's called D-Minder. And you might not use it right now at the end of January, but come April and May, if you're in Wisconsin, and those of you who aren't in Wisconsin, welcome. Maybe you're in a better place to make vitamin D. The app is good to use anywhere. You can put in your location and your skin type and your vitamin D level, and then it tells you if it's the time of the day and you're outside and how much skin you have exposed based on what you're wearing, how much vitamin D you're actually making that day. So I love this app. It is really great if you want to encourage a habit of getting outside and making more vitamin D, which is key not only for gut health, but just about every single other health indicator you could be concerned about. If you can't go out in the sun, which right now, even if I went outside in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was wearing a tank top, I could not physically make vitamin D because there's not enough UV light available this time of year. And so you need to use some kind of light therapy if you live in a place where you can't make UV for 2/3 of the year, like I do. So Spurdy is a company that makes a couple of different lamps. This is just an example of one of them. And it's a vitamin D lamp. It's a UV light, and you wear goggles because it's UV, and you stand in front of it, and your skin, your body makes vitamin D as a result. So this is a healthier alternative to taking a supplement, for example, whereby you will produce your own vitamin D. And I'll just take the time to say briefly that the reason that making the vitamin D is more important than supplementing it is that scientists have found that if you make it, the vitamin D you make will be more involved in more biochemical benefits in your body than a vitamin D that's supplied from the outside through supplementation. So you just don't get the same amount of benefit from it. And I included this study here to show that there is research showing that when you use light therapy, such as a UV light or a red light, which isn't going to help you with vitamin D, but can help with a lot of other things, you do actually get a more beneficial microbiome as a result of using the light therapy. So it does translate to many net benefits, including the benefit for the biome. If you have any questions while I'm talking, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll have some time at the end today. Okay, tip number 2 is reduce your electric and magnetic field exposure, or EMF exposure. So most of us are getting EMF exposure just through like the laptop that I'm sitting in front of right now, or my smartphone, or my Wi-Fi router. All of these things emit electric and magnetic fields. And scientists know that this is harmful to our gut bacteria. There's a number of other studies showing that it's harmful to us in other ways, but we're not going to talk about that topic in very much detail today. Here's an excerpt from the government's website about how you can reduce your EMF exposure. So basically just being more conscientious, limiting your time on the screen, maybe in your leisure time doing less on the screen can be helpful. Turning your devices off when they're not in use is also especially helpful. The good news is also there are things you can do that help make your body more resilient to the EMF exposure that's becoming more and more common now, right? Like it used to be 3G, now it's 4G, now it's even, later it's 5G. So we're just living in this world where there's increased electric exposure and magnetic exposure due to this amazing technology. Some people are going to be more vulnerable to that exposure than others. And so if you're somebody who's more sensitive, you probably already know, maybe you're a little more vulnerable to this. And there are different lifestyle practices you can do that make you more resilient to the modern exposure to EMFs. For example, this study talks about how heat helps the bacteria in the gut recover from EMF exposure. So I'm thinking sauna. Or if you don't have access to a sauna, you can do something called a biomat, which is like a sauna mat. They also make sauna blankets. So there's many different ways you can get your body hotter and help support the gut bacteria and being resilient this way. Tip number 3 is eat cruciferous vegetables. And so if you know what cruciferous vegetables are and you don't like them, you might be sad about this. But the good news is that cruciferous vegetables, which are in the broccoli family, are, you only have to have a little bit. It's not like you have to eat this big serving of broccoli every day. Probably need about a 1/4 cup at minimum because you're eating it to feed the gut bacteria. And in my opinion, that's what one of the main benefits of eating high fiber plant foods translates to. It's not necessarily for our body. Our cells actually need fuel and nutrients that come in other foods before they need the plant-based foods like these prebiotic foods I'm going to talk about. You're eating them to feed the gut bacteria, so you don't necessarily have to eat a lot if you don't like them, or maybe you have a low tolerance and they cause gas or bloating. You can just have a very small serving and work on your tolerance over time. So this has been extensively studied. I mean, there's so many different benefits in the cruciferous vegetables, but the benefit that translates to a more diverse gut bacteria is very well established. So just thinking about eating a little bit of cauliflower, making mashed cauliflower or cauliflower rice might be one way, eating a little broccoli. Here's the list of cruciferous vegetables, or some of them. So arugula, which is a leafy green, bok choy, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. I just got some pickled Brussels sprouts at the co-op last week. I was curious to try them. They were okay. And cabbage, cauliflower, collards, horseradish, if you like sushi, or wasabi, kale, kohlrabi, radishes, turnips, watercress. Just some examples of cruciferous vegetables that, if you eat a little bit every day, really helps with diversifying the gut. Tip number 4 is to eat seasonally. And this actually comes from research that scientists have done on indigenous populations of people like the Hadza people who are hunter-gatherers. So they're not in a modernized society like you and I are, and we, compared to them, have lower gut bacteria on average. And so scientists are looking at, well, why is, the modern gut biome less diverse than these indigenous people? And one of the things they found is that they have a diverse biome and they have different species that seem to cycle with their cyclical eating patterns. So they'll be eating more berries in one season, and then in another season, they might be hunting more animals and then eating tubers all year round. So this article in Science Magazine talks about why, if you want to check it out. I just have pictured here some examples of things that are local to us right now. Pretty much our local vegetables right now in January are things that can withstand the winter storage. So I have some squash seeds pictured here. Obviously eating local squash, eating the squash seeds, very high in fiber, a food that is called a prebiotic, which basically means that it's a food for the good bacteria in the digestive system. Beets are another example. And then beauty heart radish is also pictured. I love to chop up these beauty heart radishes, and I have been eating them for lunch lately.